everyone, and welcome to Hospitality Talks, COVID-19's impact on the global hotel industry. My name is Sandra Fuentes. I'm the Senior PR and Market Manager at Hosco. First and foremost, I want to welcome all of you, and I thank you for joining us this afternoon or this morning or tonight, depending where you are located around the world. Hospitality Talks, it's an initiative that we launched here at Hosco, where we bring industry experts like Steve, who is going to be speaking to you today, to, of course, so they can share best practices, shed light over the trends and the changes that are currently happening in the industry, so you can make most of this time at home. As we all know, many of us are in lockdown. It depends where you are located, and we're at different phases, but we're all at home. So we want to help you make most of this time at home, and of course, be better prepared for when the outbreak is under control and we can all go back to normal and the industry is back up to speed. At Hosco, our main, our mission, our passion is to empower hospitality. And we do so by bringing together, of course, professionals and students. Currently, we have more than 1 million Hosco members in the network. Also, of course, we bring companies that can provide opportunities to all this talent. And currently, we have more than 7,000 industry partners as part of the platform. And we also bring one very, very important pillar in all sectors, which is education. And we have currently more than 400 schools and education centers as part of Hosco, as Hosco partners. Under the same umbrella of empowering hospitality, just a few weeks ago, we launched Hosco Learning. So if you go to hosco.com and you look on the top menu, you will find courses. And if you click there, you will be able to explore certain different opportunities for you to upskill, or even if you're not part of the hospitality industry and you're thinking about joining this amazing industry, starting with your education, you can find the best program, certificate or degree that fits your needs and what you're looking for. Also, one of the values at Hosco and one that we treasure is data. We love data. And with that in mind, last month, we published what we have called hospitality polls. In the hospitality polls, we assess the sentiment and the opinion of HR specialists, general managers, and business owners of the industry about when do they think the industry will recover, starting with, of course, recruitment. When do they think they will reactivate their recruitment plans? When do they think the headcount of their teams are going to go back to the normal numbers before COVID started back in March? So in May, we published April's reports, and next week, stay tuned because we will be publishing May's results. And in that report, you will be able to see the difference between their sentiment in April and in May, and how their opinion has slightly evolved and changed over the past 2 months. Before we start with the webinar, which I know you're very eager to see, it's a subject, of course, of great interest for all the stakeholders in the industry. You will see over right around here a box called Q&A, where you can submit your questions. And just so you know, we won't be answering questions during Steve's presentation. We're leaving the questions for the when the webinar is completed. And unfortunately, because of time, we won't be able to answer every single question you might have. We will do our best to address your doubts. And so submit your questions. I encourage you to submit your questions. I'll be watching very closely, and I'll pick the 2 to 3 that we think are best and that might cover in general the doubts people might have. So now I pass the room to Steve Hood. Thank you so much, Steve, for bringing this data to the Hosco community and to the hospitality professionals. Steve Hood is the Senior Vice President of research for STR. So the room is all yours, and thank you. Enjoy.
Well, thank you very much, and it's great to be with you this afternoon. I'm a big Hosco fan, have been for many years, and good friends with many of the people there. So it's great to be with you all, and great to share some data. As was mentioned, I'm Senior Vice President of Research for STR. Most of you probably have some familiarity with STR in the industry. Also, founding director of the Share Center program, which is STR's outreach. It's the way we support over 1,000 universities in 80 different countries around the world. So committed to academia, and so it's great to be with you. I know this is a diverse group as well. For our agenda today, really the goal is to give you a performance update on what's going on around the world. We are going to focus on Europe, but we're going to be looking at industry performance around the world. We will begin to look, we'll see beginning signs of recovery and talk about lessons to learn there. And that's really our goal for the day. We're going to start at a high level view. We're going to look at the world, and then we're going to zoom into various regions. No surprise, one of the big impacts of the COVID-19 event has been hotel closures. And this world map shows you at the end of April, it shows you the percentage of hotels that are closed in various regions of the world. And of course, the big number there, no surprise, is Europe, 76%. So 3/4 of the hotels closed in Europe at this point in time at the end of April, and we'll have May data updated soon. But look at some of the other areas of the world. Asia 38%, Northern Africa 57%, Mideast not as much, 36%, and other areas as well. Now, this map here shows actual occupancies at the end of April in those same regions. The colors that are behind the scenes, the red and the yellow, have to do with restrictions, and you're going to see that loosens up. Between the end of April and the end of May, which is the next slide I show with you, you'll see a lot of these countries have loosened restrictions, and so that's been good news. But look at the actual occupancy for Europe, 11% at the end of April, and Northern Africa 11% as well, Mideast 31%. Now mainland China at 36% actually is an improvement when you go back to look at March and February. North America at 24%. So now let's jump ahead from end of April to end of May, and we see a lot less red. The red that you saw back there were country, government imposed restrictions. So you see a lot less red. The orange actually shows suggestions, and the yellow basically is now sort of open. But look at the difference in the numbers. Europe goes from 11% to 16% between in a month time frame. Look at mainland China goes from 36% to 47%. Look at North America from 24 to 35, and other areas as well. So restrictions are starting to ease. Actual occupancies are creeping up, and we'll look at that more as we look at additional data. Now, these are box plot graphs that we show here, and this actually shows every market that we track. We get data from close to 70,000 hotels in 200 different countries and about 700 different markets around the world. The markets are color-coded by the continent on the right-hand side, but you see the distribution of these markets. There's outliers on the bottom, outliers on the top, and then the gray boxes show the average, and we're looking at occupancy based upon the daily data we receive from all these hotels. You can see the big drop is, if you look at the worldwide average, the big drop is March, and by end of March, everything's at the bottom. Now, it took place different areas when we'll drill down into more in a minute, but you can see that's sort of the big distribution. And you see since March, things are creeping upward if we look at a worldwide average. Good, so that's the world. Now, well, let's focus on some areas of interest. And of course, the first area of interest would be China. And look at the blue line graph here for China. Now, China hit bottom and this is actual occupancy. It hit bottom the second week of February, and if anybody's interested in more of this data, obviously I'm showing I'm showing a small group of slides. I have hundreds of slides that I choose from, but China hit bottom the first week of February. It actually, total occupancy for the country, mainland China, excuse me, was below 10% during at the very beginning of February. Notice the blue line has crept up from 10% up to 47%. Now, 47% would normally be dismal for mainland China, but when you were at 10% a couple months ago, that's actually looking pretty good. Look at Europe now, the purple line. You can see that it started its descent at the end of February and then hit bottom, middle to end of March, the purple line. And you can see that Europe has been very slow to recover. So it actually went down to below 10%, has crept up to 15%. And then you see other areas of the world. Mideast did not go down as significantly, just went down to about 25%, about the same time period, but is crept back up just to 38, and then you see the U.S. Just at 22% and back up to 38% as well. That's sort of where various areas of the world are right now. Obviously, folks are looking at China right now because it's ahead of the curve, and China has been in recovery mode for several months now, and that's why folks are looking at China to try to find lessons learned. And as you see here, China hit bottom, as I said, beginning of February, and has crept up. You begin to see in April and May, you begin to see the weekday weekend patterns emerge. You begin to see some of the big holidays. And especially on the weekends, some of those big holidays come in. So, things beginning to go back to subnormal. Now, notice those occupancies aren't even back up to 50%. That's why I'm saying subnormal. You can see the last 3 weekends, and this is data as of just last week, the last 3 weekends have come up to about the same. There was a holiday in there. That was the one that was a little higher than others. There is some concern that perhaps China is plateauing, and of course we're going to have to wait and see in the next couple of weeks to see if it keeps creeping up or if it's going to reach a plateau and then take some weeks to go back up. And that's, of course, why everybody's so focused on the China data right now. One of the brightest spots in China is the fact that hotels have reopened. When we were talking to these general managers back in February, about half of them were closed, and many of them were telling us we may never reopen. Well, that has not been the case. Look at the reopen rate, and we do this based upon the STR scale segments that most of you learned in university, luxury through economy. But look, all of them, almost all these hotels are reopening. That's great news. A couple other quick things to share with you regarding China. This shows the hotels, and this is mainland China. It's showing the last couple weeks of data, and it's showing the hotels broken out by the class segments: luxury and upper upscale and upper mid and economy. You can see mid and economy are really leading. Their occupancies are the highest, and they're all moving up. But right now, mid scale and economy tend to have the higher occupancies than the upper groups. Important to remember and keep in mind. And a lot of times I tell when I'm in the university talking to kids, they're always thinking about going to work at the luxury hotels. Don't forget the mid-scale and economy hotels. There are opportunities there, and frequently, you can move ahead and get promoted much quicker in those types of hotels. So don't forget that. Don't discount that, and especially when you're thinking about opportunities in the future. Some other good news. This is the Labor Day holiday in China. Look at the region of Hainan. 75 to 80% occupancy rates in Hainan, and of course everybody's familiar with Sanya, the big resort in China. Very high occupancies during that weekend, and that's an area that's not as easy to get to as many of the other areas in China. If you look at that same the data during May, you can see high ADRs in Sanya. So Sanya's ADRs right now are actually higher than they were last year. So that's what this slide is showing. They're back in growth mode. That's very positive sign. That's a resort leisure type destination. Now this shows different types of cities in China. The first tier cities that everybody's familiar with, they're the purple line. The leisure destinations like Hainan, that's where Sanya is, in the red, and you can see the big jump in Labor Day in that group. But then look at the provincial capitals. Now, these are the business capitals. This is great news. Some of those smaller cities, not the first tier, but the second tier cities having good numbers, and that's another great sign there in terms of these second tier cities beginning to show a return to business. Another thing we're seeing in China, look at city centers versus surrounding areas. We're seeing the surrounding areas achieving more demand, bigger business than the city centers. And obviously there's some, still some concern about going back to the, downtown areas, less concern in those smaller cities and the surrounding areas. Here's one location in a little bit of a resort location, saw a return during the holiday of the luxury hotels. That's good news, and don't, we typically see that in recovery type situations. At some point, folks will be coming back and visiting the luxury hotels soon. So just a few signs from China, positive signs and things, data that we're tracking and things we're going to continue to watch. Now let's broaden a little bit from China and let's go to Asia real quick. This was about the worst time in Asia. This was back March, and as things in China had definitely become impactful and that impact beginning to spread to the rest of Asia. If you look, and this is a RevPAR percent change, so these are going to be big negative numbers as things are going down from a RevPAR point of view. Remember, RevPAR is a combination of occupancy and ADR, so this shows sort of the combined impact. Look at a place like Sanya at this point in time, it was at negative 91. Other Macau at negative 86, other China cities close to negative 90, and then you see the impact spreading throughout the rest of Asia. Singapore coming in at negative 57. I have a lot of data on Asia, which I don't have time to share. We can look at, if you're interested, we could look at other areas of the world and look at what's going on. I did want to share a few little bits as far as Asia and just some signs, some bright signs in Asia. Now, Philippines during the event has been a bit of an outlier. The occupancy in the Philippines has stayed around the 50% level. There's a lot of explanation for that I can share with you if you're in the Philippines or interested, but it's still not back to the 2019 levels, and it is sort of stagnated, and we're watching that closely. Singapore has been an outlier as well, and although it was impacted significantly at the very beginning, it has risen, and you can see occupancies in Singapore are up close to 70 and 80% now. So that's been a bit of an outlier as well. Vietnam, of course, a very, a country very reliant upon tourism. We're beginning to see signs. Look at some of the weekend trends that we're seeing, and you're seeing some positive signs. Now, positive is just going from 12% to 25%, but at least it's a beginning of a sign. And South Korea, same kind of thing. Look at the spikes on the weekends in South Korea. That biggest spike was a holiday weekend, the 1st of May, and you saw occupancies in South Korea returning to 50%. Obviously not normal, but again, beginning signs of recovery. And we're going to spend a little more time focusing on Europe and drilling down into Europe. Here we're looking back at the end of April. This is the percentage of closed hotels throughout Europe as of the end of April. And look at some of the big numbers here. You see a lot of numbers in the 70s and the 80%. In Spain and Portugal, you're seeing in the 90%. Rome at 84, but that was actually an improvement. Paris at 88. And so, and notice very few areas are immune to this. Now, the only immunity that you do see is St. Petersburg and Moscow. And I can explain more about why those numbers are low, but you see high numbers when it comes to closures. Now, in the same time period, end of April, let's look at the actual occupancies of these areas. And the tragic thing is you see so many single digits in these areas where the best case scenario is London at 23, Madrid's at 15, and very few areas immune to the metrics. Now, we'll be looking at May data very shortly, and we're going to begin to see improvements. This is going back end of April. Look at the major metropolitan areas, the major markets in Europe. And this graph shows two different things. The purple bubbles are occupancy percent change. So look at Barcelona, for example, negative 99. And then the blue bars at the top are the actual occupancy. So you're looking at occupancies in Barcelona at this point in time. And this was just weekly data for this. So this is just for a single week. Occupancies, close to 0%. And throughout all these markets, the best close to 10% at this point in time. A little bit of recovery since then, so not quite as bleak right now as it was in April. Now this shows Italy data, and of course Italy was one of the earliest hit, and you see, look at the negative 90s back in March when it comes to Italy, major impact throughout Italy. Look at the downturns in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. They started down that path at the end of February, and these are RevPAR levels, so they are impacted by the high average daily rates in Switzerland. That's why they're a little higher. But look, all of them went down. That March 22 time period in throughout these three countries, and have been pretty flat since then. And we're beginning to see improvements in these areas. I'll share you some of that data with you coming up in a minute. So let's look at Spain and Portugal. You see May year-to-date data. A lot of high negative numbers. Now, this is year-to-date data, so this does factor in a rather positive January and February, not quite as bad numbers as if we were just looking at an individual month or an individual week. But this shows the progression in Spain, and this shows, how it went down in March, and hit bottom, and look at it since then, just a slight trickle up. And now we're looking at, this is daily data. You can see a little better numbers on the weekends. And of course, that's the transient traveler. That's the leisure traveler that is getting out a little bit more on the weekends. Portugal looks about the same, little bit slower to recover. But some things are beginning to reopen, and some things are beginning to loosen up. We're getting back to that 10% mark for both of those areas. Again, this is back a little bit when it was some of the worst numbers. Notice throughout the Mediterranean, major impact in all of these different areas. Big impact in Central and Eastern Europe. And again, people were thinking that maybe some of these areas would be a little more isolated, but not even close to the case. This is occupancy percent change at the end of March. Let's take a quick look at Mideast and Africa. Mideast has been a little different, a little less impacted. When you talk about hotel closures, much less significant there. These have been more in the 10 to 40% range, and so not at all as significant as Europe has been. And then look at the actual occupancies. Again, at the week ending May, and you see actual occupancies now in places like Abu Dhabi higher, Doha, Dubai. These are higher than what we're seeing in Asia. I mean, in Europe. So little bit isolated, but still significantly impacted. Throughout Africa, we're seeing, especially the gateway cities, significantly impacted. RevPAR percent change again in the negative 90s for a lot of these areas. A quick look at the Americas. I'm not sure how many of you are, interested in that area of the world. This is showing total U.S. data. U.S. hit bottom beginning of April, and this is a RevPAR percent change. Went down to close to negative 84. Has trickled up to negative 64. Just last week it was negative 64, and we're correlating that, of course, the purple line as COVID cases. So you see how that's going together. This was interesting, and it helps begin to get your mindset into recovery. And the U.S. just celebrated a holiday, not last weekend, but the weekend before, called Memorial Day. It used to be sort of the beginning. It's traditionally the sort of seen as sort of the beginning of the vacation season. Look at some of the high point. Look at some of the areas that saw high occupancies, and this is showing weekend occupancy during these different areas. Now, I'm guessing if you're not from the U.S., you're not going to recognize any of these areas because they're just not big names. It's not like Miami Beach or Key West or L.A. These are smaller destinations, Florida Panhandle, Myrtle Beach. These are not the big high-profile destinations that people fly into from all over the world. And that's not what we're seeing. That's not how the recovery is going to go. The recovery is going to be these smaller destinations. The destinations you're looking at here are drive-to destinations, so it's easier to drive to it than to get on the airplane. They are, the type of travel was more localized. It's more domestic travel, and that's sort of what we're seeing here. But notice the occupancy. Some of these are much bigger numbers. For the whole country, during this weekend, the occupancy was 40%, but for some of these areas, much higher, up to close to 80%. Another thing we track, and we can get this for any area of the world, but we track data by the type of hotels. This shows the class of hotels and what each of their occupancies were. And I was saying, total for the whole country is in the 40% range. Notice the lower class, the mid-scale and economy hotels are having higher occupancies. Now think of it, that's going to be, think about the people who are going to be there. Some of this is, transient travelers, and some of these are people traveling for business, and so. But the luxury and upper upscale hotels are lower. They're in the 20s. Think about the upper upscale hotels; those are going to be the convention and the group business, and I'll show you some more data on that in a minute. So they're going to be lower. Here's another way to look at things, and this is just using U.S. as an example. If I show you data for anywhere in the country, you're going to see the same trend. Notice the urban hotels, the ones in the big cities, they're going to be lower. Suburban, much higher. Look at the very right-hand side, small town, much higher. Interstate, much higher. Now, the good news here is the resort data has bounced back, where that several weeks ago, that resort data was in the 20s along with urban. So what are we seeing? We're beginning to see resort areas, get business, just like you saw in China. You're beginning to see people loosen up. Think about it, all of us have been locked in our homes for the last 3 or 4 months, and so as people are feeling more comfortable and as restrictions are lifting, we're going to begin to see some of these resort areas pick up, especially the lower end, the smaller resorts, as I said, not the Miami Beach type areas, but the Myrtle Beach type areas. And if anybody wants to know more about Myrtle Beach, let me know later, and I'll be glad to fill you in on that. So anyway, important trends that we're seeing, and these trends are going to these trends are going to apply everywhere in the world. When you're talking about Europe, you're talking about not the mega destinations, but you're going to talk about the smaller destinations and when it comes to resort areas. So people are feeling more comfortable. They're feeling more safe at some of these smaller end destinations. Same with the big city versus the little city. Extended stay product, we see those occupancies are much higher, and that extended stay product tends to have occupancies in the 50% range. Now, keep in mind that's a lot of business travelers and that are having to travel there. So there are those folks that are having to travel. I wanted to show this data now. This backs up until the end of March, but it's an important thing to emphasize as well. STR does track group data versus transient data. Now think of it, group data is going to be blocks of 10 or more. As no surprise, everybody knows conferences closed down, conventions, meetings, everything's canceled. And that's, of course, a trend we're going to see, everywhere in the world. This shows some of the markets in the US, but, you can look at that anywhere in Europe. Geneva Auto Show canceled. And you're going to see that the group business is going to take much longer to recover. You can see, in a lot of these areas at the worst possible time, and even now, the group business is going to be, in the negative 90s when it comes to RevPAR percent change. So that's going to take much longer. Again, these, hotels that are reliant upon group business, they're going to need to reinvent themselves and figure out how do we attract the transient traveler, because that's, for a while, that's going to be the only traveler coming. Now, that there will be exceptions to that. In China, for example, we've seen some of the group business that is heavily focused on technology. That will tend to rebound first. So, if you are in a group hotel, look at some of that high-tech business and try to target them. They're going to be, a little more apt to get out on the road quicker, study and trends have shown. So anyway, group business, significantly impacted everywhere in the world. Okay, let's talk about, and I've shown some preliminary signs, but let's, sort of summarize, and let's talk about recovery and some lessons to learn. Now, the good news is things are getting better. We're seeing signs everywhere. If you look at the number of cases, they're going down, they're diminishing in every area of the world. China, Spain, we're seeing the same kind of results. Signs are, everywhere in Asia, New Zealand, beginning to think about removing restrictions, things reopening and welcoming back tourists where that hadn't been the mindset before. You see signs here, and we're just collecting data in Italy, restaurants reopening, Switzerland, things reopening as well. And all of you guys are, from different areas of the world, and you're going to see things opening. But they're going to be new rules, and hotels have the new ways to do things, and you guys are facing that and seeing that up front as you're working in hotels for sure. Internships are going to be different, and I'll mention that at the end, the way we're trying to help when it comes to internships. Government plans are becoming more clear. We're trying to track that, and here's some data as far as countries in Europe and what we're beginning to see and what we can collect from our clients, of course, who are all throughout Europe. So things are beginning to open up. Governments under a lot of pressure to help with tourism and these associations and Swiss Hotel Association and all the various associations putting a lot of pressure, helping governments to see the importance of that and that they need to take a role in that. Extra bank holiday in Britain and 4-day weeks and work weeks and stuff. So a lot of things, but obviously things are going to take long to recover, and some governments have been very reluctant to release the restrictions, and obviously one of the biggest sectors that have been impacted by the event has been the airline industry, and so there is, we've collected a lot of announcements on that industry going back to full capacity, and how long is that going to take. We're seeing some green shoots. One of the things we do is we collect business on the books, and I'll share with you some of that data. Here's information, Airbnb showing a lot of business on the books for Denmark and for Netherlands. Tourism organization in the Algarve showing a lot of interest in the Algarve. But think about the Algarve. It's not a Miami Beach. It's not a French Riviera type destination. It's been viewed as a little bit more of a safer destination, smaller, but it's drive-to. Think of it. It's drive-to destination for Lisbon, drive-to destination for Madrid, easier to get to. And those are the types of destinations that are going to see more pickup in this recovery mode than others. Here are some good signs in the UK. These were recent bank holidays in the UK, but notice some of these areas are more. They're not downtown London. These are outer areas, some of these resort areas, and look at some of the big pickup occupancies during these bank holidays up in the 90%, and in most recent holiday up to about 100, almost 100% in the Lake District. So again, beginning to see some preliminary signs, and keep in mind, all of us have been locked in our homes, and so when there is an opportunity to get out, it looks like people are doing that. Look here in Germany, Switzerland, Netherlands, Austria. Look at some of the big peaks during the most recent holiday, up to and this is not as huge, but we're moving from the 10 to 15% up to the 25 and 30% as people are beginning to feel more comfortable getting out and experiencing, some of this demand in some of these areas. Look, this one shows, now this shows business on the books, and that's something we track. In addition to performance data, which is historic, we also track reservation data, which looks out into the future. Here we're comparing some of the island destinations with the big cities, and look at as we compare Barcelona and Madrid, which are the lines at the bottom, where their occupancies, future occupancies, and this is projected, these are based on reservations. So right now, based upon the current reservations, we're looking at occupancy levels around 10%. But when you look at some of the island destinations, you're looking up to 20 to 30%. So again, those islands are going to be a little stronger, a little less threatening, and looks like they may see more demand during the summer months. And of course, we'll have to wait to see how that all plays out. On a long-term view, we're looking at things coming back to normal, close to 2021, beginning to mid 2021, all the way back in 2022. That's sort of what as we look ahead. We do our forecasting with Tourism Economics, the most respected economic forecaster in the world, and so this is a culmination of our European forecast that is being updated next week, and we'll get that. We'll look at that again. As far as resources are concerned, when you're tracking this forward, one thing to let you know, the STR website, str.com, does have a COVID-19 link on the homepage where you can see future webinars that our folks are doing all the way around the world, as well as past webinars where you can see listen to a recording. Our folks are doing webinars now on very detailed locations like Eastern Europe and Mid-East and areas like that. So keep an eye on that. HotelNewsNow.com, most of you probably track that, a free news service. That's our sister company. A lot of articles on coronavirus and related, and what are hotels doing, what are restaurants doing, and lots of good data there. If you haven't seen that before, that's totally free, and I recommend it. And then the last thing, if you are a student or if you're a professor or an administrator, if you're not familiar with our Share Center program, please let us know if we can help you. We have close to 1,000 schools involved. We provide data for academic research and student projects. We have student certifications. Probably many of you have obtained the CHIA, Certification in Hotel Industry Analytics, and then an advanced version of that as well. We provide these programs to universities to offer to their students, and let us know if you're from a school and you're not familiar with that. Don't hesitate to let us know. We do a lot of other things, training programs. Our market study competition that we've been running for years, we're doing a virtual version of that. That's a great competition if you haven't been involved. One of the ways we are trying to serve schools is through virtual internships. Now, we do that with the school. It's not like we're doing it by ourselves. But if we know, and part of the problem is we know a lot of you students have been impacted and you've had internships canceled, please let us know if we can help. This is more a student project where you get hands-on experience working with live data rather than hands-on experience working in a hotel. So other ways we can help. Don't hesitate to reach out to us if we can be of service. But hopefully you found that helpful. One of the things we're trying to do is, make this as relevant as possible, especially when it comes to seeing how the recovery is working and the hotels that are being impacted. And you could see, through a lot of the sides, mid-scale and economy beginning to lead the recovery now. It'll hit the transient traveler, the leisure traveler. They're going to be leading the recovery as we come back. The group business going to be much longer to come back. Domestic travel, definitely a big factor in this. Drive-to destinations going to be significantly more popular, and that weekday versus weekend trend, you're going to see a lot of emphasis on the weekends. And if you're a hotel and you don't have a weekend special getaway program, that's going to be critical at this time. So hopefully I've shared things that are meaningful that you can go back and apply at your hotels. And but I think at this point I'll take a break and open it up for questions and answers.
Hello. I'm here again. Thank you so much, Steve. I think that was very insightful. And I know it's hard to cover. We got many questions from what's going on with this region in particular, or with this country in particular. And it's something actually that we talked about it right before we started this webinar, that we know we have audiences, as I said, from all over the world, right? That's the magic of internet. So we will try to address your questions. You can shoot us an email as well at contact@hosco.com with the specific data you're looking for, and we will try to either conduct a webinar maybe over a specific region, or put you in contact with Steve and with STR so you can also access those specific reports as well. Also, many of you were asking if you could get the slides of this presentation, and just so you know, next week you will receive the recording of this webinar directly onto the email you provided. So the email you registered with, you will receive the recording of this webinar there. I picked some questions. There were many interesting ones, so thank you for submitting your questions. One I think is very obvious, but maybe I want to address it so it's clear. But this is for you, Steve, of course, to clarify. Should we rethink the strategy and retarget the local people instead of the foreign tourists? I think it's a pretty obvious one, but.
Absolutely, and that's and that's an important takeaway there. You can see that for the next 6 months to a year, your guests are going to be a different type of guest than what you're normally used to seeing. International travel, and sorry I had good slides on that, but places that are reliant upon international travel, that is not happening right now. So you need to rethink the mindset and think, hey, how are we going to offer a unique experience to that domestic traveler, to the people nearby? They may have visited your hotel a couple years ago, well, they haven't been there for a couple of years. So what can you do to entice them to come back, see the new things we've done, experience the new attractions, and come back and
Yeah,
revisit your hotel?
use that historic database, right? And your CRM, different CRM tools to re-engage, right? Those guests, as you mentioned, that maybe are located, let's say, hotels in Costa Brava, people are located in Barcelona. So as you said, people that can drive the car towards that destination and more towards the weekend or maybe long weekends, depending on everyone's agenda, of course.
Exactly. And those are strategies that you guys can apply. When your hotel reopens, hopefully it already has reopened, you come back there with these kinds of ideas and say, hey, here's something, that we need to be thinking about here, or think about it. Marketing. I mean, if my hotel had been closed for the last couple months, I would have spent all my energies rethinking a marketing campaign, having pictures on my website of people cleaning the hotel and then when people do start coming back, pictures on the website of people enjoying the beach or enjoying the pool, socially distancing, being safe, but having a great time, so that when somebody does search and see my hotel, look at these people having a great time, even with everything going on.
Of course. One question, and this one might be a little bit harder. How long do you think it is going to take the European hotels to reach an 80 to 90% occupancy? Again, considering the slow reopening of the borders in Europe, travel restrictions, and so on.
Yeah, you have a lot of risks or a lot of issues involved: the reopenings, the international travel, and then group business. And keep in mind, group business is going to be a key there, because it takes a lot longer for those groups to start back up. You can't go, if you're a group sales manager somewhere, when you're starting to talk to people again, they're not coming next month. They're coming hopefully in the fall, realistically probably in the spring, but you need to be targeting those people. The good news is that they've probably canceled or postponed an event, so now you have an opportunity. They need to come back, and you have an opportunity to begin setting up that business for, if you can't get them in the fall, or maybe give them a special, winter type situation during the holidays or something, but at least get them back next year and begin setting that business up. And so, that's going to take time. And, that's why we're saying, we're looking at recovery by, end of 2021 for things to be back to, where they were before.
So about 18 months from now.
Yeah. If you look at, past downturns, and this is something we could do in a follow-up. If you look at, for example, during the economic recession, how things took, it took time for things to go down and then time for things to recover. And and different recessions have behaved differently. In 2001, it took about 24 months to get back to normal. In 2009, it took about 36 months to get back to normal. Now, everybody's sort of hoping this is going to be more like a 2001 recovery, because attributes of it are a little more similar, but it will take some time. The other interesting thing to look at when you're looking at the data is to look at the ADR data. Obviously, hotels are discounting to try to entice those folks to get back, and we can't give you, we can't tell you what to do as far as pricing is concerned, but there was a lot of concern previously, because of some of that deep discounting, and just be careful there. Obviously everybody is, tries to entice those travelers to get back, and you're only as fortunate as your stupidest competitor when it comes to discounting. And if they're giving away rooms and they're your competitors, you're screwed. But just be careful. Look at that data carefully as you're making, good business revenue management related decisions as far as future business is concerned. Transient traveler comes back much quicker so than the group traveler. And so target that transient traveler, target that leisure traveler, target the weekend business, and that's where your mind needs to be, and that's where you need to be thinking.
Well, you were mentioning pricing. Actually, the next question, but I think it's pretty much answered. We have someone asking if you consider or you think that the COVID situation is going to have an impact on the pricing of the hotel rooms in order to attract guests. And as you said, it's going to be perhaps a fight between hotels, but there is so much low you can go, because you need also, of course, margin. You need profit to pay everyone, right, to stay alive.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, profitability, every hotel should have a pretty good understanding of their margins and what it takes to be profitable. Just be careful. And as you're making those good business decisions, be sure, you're not, reducing the ability of you to make a profit. So that's the key. Again, you're looking at a different type of traveler that's coming in. In some of that cases, that might be a loyal traveler who's going to, if you can get them to come back every year, then you may make a different set of decisions than if you're looking at a customer that's, more a one-time customer, going to come to visit once, but then next year they're going to be off to a totally different area of the world. All of those are good business decisions that you need to factor in and figure out how to, make good revenue management strategic decisions.
Okay, one last question is more about destinations who actually live out of international travelers, because of course you mentioned, especially here in Europe, it's easier to drive your car from Barcelona to the south of France or even to Portugal. But what about Maldives, Seychelles? What are the trends telling you there for those kind of
Greek islands, things like that. I mean, that's the real challenge. Hawaii, all those types of destinations are really hurting, and so they're going to have to be as creative as possible. And just, working with the airlines to try to bring back, some international travel, but it's hard, and those are going to be the destinations that are most hard hit during this situation. So, some sort of domestic travel, whatever it might be. The thing, you're going to see smaller groups potentially traveling more than larger groups, but you're right, it's much more of a challenge.
Yeah, it will be more challenging for them. Well, thank you so much. I guess summary, as a conclusion or as a summary, key points is domestic travel, looking into packages and offers you can make to your guests for the weekends, right? Looking into that database of guests that are around the corner, maybe try to reactivate them and re-engage them and bring them to your hotel during the weekend, and offer, of course, a great experience so they can keep coming back maybe throughout the summer, since it seems that we're going to be trying to be driving around instead of flying anywhere. And once again, if you have more questions about this webinar, or if you have any idea or suggestions of webinar you would like to receive from us, please send us an email to contact@hosco.com. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much, Steve. And that's it for today.